Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me today I have Dan.
Hey, how are you?
Yes, not too bad, not too bad. We had a week off last week. City didn't have a game because of the FA Cup and Valentine's Day and other sorts of commitments last week meant that we thought we'd postpone it until this week, where we could sort of delay for as long as possible some discussion about two pretty disappointing results that essentially spell the end of our push for the playoffs. The first, the 2-0 loss to Derby 2 Saturdays ago, and then the midweek draw, I should say, to Rotherham, although it did feel like a loss given how it panned out. We'll start with that Derby game, and I guess this wasn't a hugely surprising result, I've got to be honest. We sort of talked in the lead up to it that we don't have a great record against Derby, both in the league and in cups in recent years. And apart from a decent chance for Grzycki early in the game, we really didn't look too sharp in the game and went down 2-0. Um, I guess how do you sort of take a loss like that? Is it sort of a concern that now had two back-to-back performances against Derby, against Blackburn, which were pretty, I guess, not too encouraging as away performances, not very attacking. No goals scored in those two games. How do you view the Derby game in that sort of context?
Look, I think it really was like it kind of was a season-defining game at the with the point of the season that we're at. If we'd been able to, like, even a point would have put us in a hugely different position. But to lose, I guess, as you mentioned, not unsurprising. Although we both, I think, expected a better performance from
Yeah,
us. Um, I think it was hugely damaging to the momentum that we had. Um, Although it sort of had already been um, damaged with the ending of our 10 game unbeaten run. But I think, yeah, it I think that match had a lot more significance than many people probably would see or would consider. Yeah, it did. It sort of was, or the way I see it, and the way I think a lot of people now are seeing it, that game sort of was the nail in the coffin that you were mentioning. Sort of that, in terms of any chance of making the playoffs, it's a slim hope. I think we were just talking about off air that even if we were to go on another 10 game unbeaten run, the teams above us now, because the gap is so large, would only need to win 2 or 3 games in that 10 game stretch to still maintain their position above us on the table. And with only 14 games to play, it's fine margins. I can't see. I think that was the game that sort of signaled the end of the playoff chase. But I think Mark Pugh came out and said that basically we need to forget about that, forget about the second half of the Rotherham game, and just get back to basics and get back to just focus on finishing as high as we can. Um, I mean, when you consider the season as a whole, if we can finish in the top half of the table still, I mean, anywhere we finish now is going to be a successful season compared to what we
yeah.
were expecting coming into the year. So, um,
And I think that's it. I think that's how we've got to look at it is I think we've been a bit spoiled with that great run of form over the new year where we sort of started to raise our hopes, raise our sights up the table. But realistically, coming into this season, it was all about staying up. And barring an absolute catastrophe, I don't even think mathematically we could go down from this point. So we've got to be happy with that. Canada's a successful season and just try and aim to finish top half of the table because at the end of the day, that would be a hugely successful season and really exceed expectations. Um, and yeah, try not to be too upset that we haven't to finish in the top six. That'd be like a Watford supporter being disappointed that they're not going to finish top four in the Premier League. Like they're having a great season. They're top eight, I think, in the Premier League at the moment, but you can't sort of be disappointed then that you're not going that one step further. And I think for us, finishing top half would be a fantastic result for the season.
yeah, and I mean, especially when you consider like not only the playing roster, but the whole context that has surrounded our club for the last few years, and you consider
Yeah.
how we've talked many times about the off-field issues and that. But when you consider all that and you look at the whole picture, it's an incredible achievement to have gone 10 games unbeaten in this season. Like that's good on itself, but to have got ourselves into a position where like it was probably a bit of a fantasy regardless, but to get into a position where like the idea that we were within reach of the playoffs come the end of the season, that's just insane to think of. And I think the only thing I think like now that that sort of distraction is gone, um, maybe now the club can sort of get down to business and say, okay, which players, because we've got plenty of players coming off contract. Adkins isn't even recontracted for next season yet. Like now is a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
opportunity for them to say, okay, well, we sort of know where we're going to be next year. We know what we're working with now. Let's get down to business, start sorting out what squad we're going to have for next season, and try and finish the season as strongly as we can on the field, but consolidate off the field.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit after the discussion about Rotherham. We can talk about those players who are out of contract this summer. But yeah, it's a great point that now that we've sort of, um, I guess, we know where we'll be next season. We know we're not going to get relegated. We know we're pretty unlikely to get promoted. Um, it is just about finishing the season as strongly as we can and see how we can go from there. Um, but we can talk about the Rotherham game as well, which I suppose was the more disappointing of the two in one sense, in the fact that we looked so comfortable in that first half, opened the scoring within the first minute from Jared Bowen. And really, it looked like another one of those sorts of performances as we'd put in against, say, Bolton earlier in the season, where we just went on and completely tore them apart. To be 2-0 up at half time and then to draw 2-2 was really sort of dispiriting and sort of underlines the mentality of the club the last couple of weeks, the last month. And it's much more as it was at the start of the season, where we just couldn't hold a lead that we had in a game. A little bit concerning that Marshall's form is sort of dipping as well, but that might be more to do with the defensive players in front of him. I'm not too sure. Um, but I guess the positive out of the game in terms of statistics was that Bowen and Campbell became our first combination since 2011-2012 with Fried and Corrin to each get to double figures for goals, which I remember when Corrin and Fried did it, it was sort of this big achievement because for so long we hadn't had two strong attacking players who were able to notch double figures. And in fact, before that, the last time was Dino and Campbell back in the promotion season of 07-08. So kind of funny to see Campbell bookending that statistic in a little bit, but great from those two. And I think I'm pretty sure that makes it 30 goals now in the championship for Bowen, which is at his age and his experience level quite remarkable.
Yeah, yeah, that Rotherham game. Like you said, going up 2-0 early, we look comfortable. And I think we had tipped it that we were gonna just sort of that should a game that we should have cruised through and should have, put a few past them. And it looked like it was gonna go that way. And then don't know, not sure what happened. When they came out in the second half, it was just a completely different game. So I think we're probably starting to see how influential Burke and Device had become. We obviously knew that they were in form, but um, it sort of at times has looked like we've been maybe able to just hold on a little bit without them, and that sort of started to curtail those last couple of games. But I think the news is that they're back full time, full training, and Burke is, I think, definitely being considered for a start in on the weekend. I think Device maybe still not quite there, but I think from what I've been reading and hearing that they're both just about fit again. I think it was good to see Ridgewell. We finally got another a senior centre back, and from what I understand, he had um, it was a bit of a mixed bag, but I think it was for everyone. But I mean, it's his first probably full 90 minutes in what, 6, 8 months or something. It's been a little while. So since whenever he last played for Portland Timbers, I suppose. Um, so I mean, it's good to see he's in the fold, and he played okay, but um, will be interesting to see how he fits in with Device and Burke coming back.
Yeah, and I guess
Uh,
it's good to have a bit of senior depth if nothing else. And I think at this stage it's quite clear that Device and Burke are going to be our sort of number
um,
one centre back partnership. So yeah, I guess the sooner that Device can get back, the better.
yeah, in terms of Marshall's form, I think, I mean, it's hard. I didn't get to watch a lot of the game, so I can't speak too deeply on this, but I think somewhat like a goalkeeper's form is always sort of inherently tied to the form of their defenders. Um, like if you're it like it's that man, the more shots you have to try and save, the eventually one's gonna go in, sort of thing. It's got a term. It's just escaped my mind right now. But anyway, um, so I think overall, I'm probably not too worried about Marshall. I think he's played so well, basically for the majority of the season, and like he hasn't let in 4 goals, 3, 4 goals in a game. It's a little patch that has coincided with having even less experienced defenders than our already inexperienced backline had in front of him. So I'm probably not too worried about Marshall, but I think in the coming weeks when we get that our first choice pairing back, that'll really be the true a true indication of whether his form is dipping. Yeah, Bowen and Campbell reaching double figures each is awesome. I mean, I wonder what's Grosicki on at the moment. Is he 5 or 6 or something?
I think he's something like that. I'll look that up while you're.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, if I mean, 14 games to go, could he? If he got a goal every 3 games, sort of thing, to have every like one on our front line to reach double figures, that would be something that'd be something in itself, and it's probably not unachievable. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
he
think
must be on something like that.
yeah,
Looks like looks like he might have 5 goals with 7 assists so far this season. So I mean, even if he could get to 10 assists for the
yeah,
season and 7 or 8 goals, that would be pretty good.
yeah. I think I mean, we sort of already knew, like they've been the shining lights essentially for, in a lot of regard with our team. So it's not probably it's not surprising, but yeah, Bowen, it's been good. It was a bit slow to get started this season, and I guess there were those questions over whether he was going to be, last season's one season wonder, that he was going to had that great season last year, and whether everyone would have figured him out this year. But he's done enough. He's adapted to what's been put in front of him, and he's performed um, as well as probably better than he did last year. Um, or last season. So that's been great to see. Long may it continue. Long may he continue in the black and amber. Uh, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the off season, one way or the other. For Bowen in particular, I mean, we've sort of ridden our luck a little bit in recent seasons where our entire transfer budget has come from 1 or 2 players being sold for a decent fee. And whether Bowen is that sort of golden goose this summer remains to be seen. But I guess that's a good point to sort of transition to the discussion about these players out of contract in the summer, because there is yet again quite a large group of them. The obvious ones being Kane, Martin, and Pugh, whose loans end, although I suspect 2 of those 3 will look to get on free transfers. And then there's Evandro, Henriksen, Keane, Marshall, Mazook, Weir, Campbell, Mannion, Burton, Curry, and Ridgewell, all out of contract in the summer. And of those, I think Evandro, Keane, Weir are 100% gone. I think Henriksen is likely to go. I think I remember saying something about him wanting to go back to Norway to raise his kid. And the club would probably be pretty keen to get his wages off the book anyway. I think Marshall's pretty much gone as well. I think much like McGregor, it's a case of just too expensive to have him on the books as a keeper, and we'll be looking to have Long as our number one next season. Um, I think Mazuk's pretty much gone. I think he's too injury prone to really offer too much in the way of defensive reinforcement. I don't think we can rely on him. Ridgewell, I don't know whether he was just sort of a short-term reinforcement, whether we'd look to sign him on another deal. If he plays, half a dozen games, perhaps he'll look good enough to earn himself a new one-year contract. I'm not sure. I think Campbell will definitely get another year. I don't know if there's an option for that already or whether we'd offer him another year or two as a contract. And then Mannion, Burton, Curry. I don't know with Mannion and Burton whether we'd maybe re-sign one of the two, whether we'd want both of them. I'm not sure how we see the goalkeeper situation in that sense. Curry, I could definitely see a new deal for as well. He looks like a good developing centre back, and I'm sure the club would sort of view it as another potential, under 23s player who could break into the senior team and, develop into a really good player who we could then sell for a decent fee. So I think those players' contracts sort of speak for themselves, but I don't know. Did you have any other thoughts on those?
Not really. I think basically the talk's been in terms of like Marshall and Henriksen has been, maybe we can start having conversation and see if they would re-sign with a reduced wage. But like as you're saying, like they're on Premier League contracts. Like you're not going to be talking about dropping, from 20 to 18,000 pounds a week or something. It's going to be a significant drop, and
Yeah.
whether they're willing to make that sacrifice remains to be seen. I agree with you in that sense that it's probably unlikely. Henriksen I think he did say something about that he wanted to, I think, finish his, he was going to wanted one more contract, and then he wanted to, I think, head home and play in his homeland and raise his family at home. But, I think he had interest from, was it Bordeaux, in
Um,
the window? One of the a French
yeah, I
club, I
think so.
believe, yeah. Interest from there. Marshall, if you look at the form from over the whole season, I would be surprised if he wasn't able to find a club that will pay him more than we are willing to. I mean, I'd be surprised if they didn't at least get a contract offer from us. That would be at the very least
Yeah,
that I
I
would
do wonder.
consider. But
I wonder if it'll be sort of a token, here's a
yeah,
2-year deal at £3,000 a week sort of thing, and well, we offered them a contract, but they've rejected it sort of thing.
yeah, much similar to, I believe, what happened with Huddleston and some
Yeah.
of those others. We sort of offered something, and I think even Huddleston recently, I think, came out and said again, like if I think it might have even been in the lead up to the match that he said they offered me like something, and all they had, if they'd come back and been willing to work with it, he said I would have been more than happy to stay at the club, but they just sort of put something out there, and that was it, or it was that or nothing, and
Yeah.
it's not a real it's not a very. I mean, I don't run a football club, but I don't think it's the best, like a good way to try and negotiate contracts is, this or
Oh,
nothing.
we've
So
been saying for years that, and I remember doing an episode with, I think it was either yourself or Mitch last year or the year before, looking at what we needed to do in terms of the contract situation and the fact that we always seem to have these large groups of players coming out of contract. Because even looking ahead to the following season, we've got Grzycki going out of contract, Stewart, Dicko, Irvine, Kingsley, Terral, Bowen, McDonald, Lehigh, Batty, McKenzie, and that's a much more important group where you would think that surely at least a handful of those would be looking to surely reach out to and offer either contract extensions or new 2 to 3 year deals, particularly guys like Bowen, Irvine, maybe Batty as well, who are sort of those younger guys who could actually attract a pretty decent fee if they can kind of keep developing the way they are, where you'd want to tie them down to a longer deal so that if we do get a fee, it's actually a sizable fee.
yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting to see. I think some of the guys you mentioned, like Weir, Mazook, Evandro as well, for basically just for their injury record, will go. Keane just never showed enough for us. I mean, apparently he's got 2 in 7 for
Yeah,
Ipswich
yeah.
so far, and they're already sort of saying basically like they want to try and keep him around, sign him when at the end of the season when he's available for the free. So, I mean, good luck to him. I'm glad that he's having some success. It's unfortunate that it never worked out with us, but yeah, and I think it, with the young keepers, with Mannion and Burton, I mean, neither of them are first team players at this stage. So, I mean, I don't know what their contracts are worth, but surely it wouldn't be that hard just to re-sign them on, what they're on now and just do again, whichever one performs the best in preseason or performs the best at training gets to be the backup keeper, and the other one just goes on out on loan and is the, emergency recall if something goes wrong or whatever. But yeah, I think you're right with in terms of like Long being next year's first choice. I mean, I think that was that was something that was obviously thought out. That we got
Yeah.
he's not old, he's not young, he has experience. I think he's only 24, 25 or something. He's got experience in the championship. He came there to fight to be number one keeper. So when Marshall moves on, as is all but inevitable, he'll step into that void and um, he'll be fine. I don't know. Yeah, Dan Batty, Adam Curry, those sorts of guys, I think should be absolutely re-signed. And then it just becomes that it's just like a bloody broken record. We're always just saying like we need to sort these contracts out so that we don't have all this these huge lumps of players all off contract at once, and it's just weird management, like the way
Yeah.
that they do it all, and
Because
they do
you
it
end
all
up
the
you
time.
end up spending more on transfer fees and then
Yeah,
signing new players to a decent deal anyway. So I just don't understand not re-signing these players to either similar wages or slight improvements, and I'm sure it would end up being a saving over the long term
yeah,
rather than paying these transfer fees.
and I think for me, like the saddest part about it is like a lot of these players that have left, um, would still be playing first team for us, are quality players, and most of them leave and they say, I would have been happy to stay. And I
Yeah,
think that's the worst thing. Like, bar Tom Ince and a few others that sort of said, I'm getting out, I'm ready to, this club's not good enough for me or whatever. But, if you look at the last couple of seasons and all the players that have left, I would say probably, 60, 70% of them would say I would have been happy to have re-signed and still been at City. So I think for me, that's the saddest part.
yeah,
But I guess that it sort of is what it is. And it's probably the same with most clubs, to be honest, that I don't think in such great numbers as it happens here, but I think there's always going to be players who leave who would have liked who would have been happy to stay. But yeah.
yeah. Well, we'll move on now and sort of wrap things up by looking ahead to a double header next week. We've got Brentford on the weekend and then Millwall during the week. Um, I guess at this stage of the season, we sort of touched on when we were talking about the Derby and the Rotherham games. It's all about just finishing as high as we can in the table. I think the Brentford game will pose us more challenges. They're on a decent run of form with 3 wins in five, but did just get smashed by Swansea in the FA Cup. They're only 4 points behind us as well, so it's going to be a tough one there. And with the added sort of drama of Odubajo coming back to the KCOM, if we want to speak about players who might not necessarily have wanted to leave, but sort of felt unwelcome or unwanted at the club. Um, and then then I think we also host Millwall midweek, so it's a double header at home. And they're 20th in the table with no wins in their last 5 games and haven't even scored in their last 3 games. So I guess in a similar sort of fashion to the Derby and the Rotherham doubleheader, we've got one game with a team, sort of around us on the table, and then one game against a team quite low on the table. Sort of hopeful that we'd be able to get 4 points out of these two.
Yeah, I mean, when I was just looking at them and you were talking, like 4 points was the sort of figure that came into my head as I'd be, if you take a point from Brentford, that's probably pretty good. They don't get any closer, you know, and yeah, I think Millwall becomes a game that we much like we said about Rotherham, a game that we should be winning. I think a lot of it probably will depend on, whether Device and Burke are available for, both or one of, or whatever happens with those returning players. I think at this stage, their inclusion will be a huge boost. If I knew that they were both going to be available for the game against Brentford, I might even be saying, I'd expect 3 points from it and be greedy. But it's just hard to see, hard to call without knowing exactly where they're at. But I think with those two in the team, we're going to be much stronger. So I think probably like I could see probably like a 1-1 or something like that just against Brentford. Nothing too wild, but I don't know about Millwall. It sort of scares me. It shouldn't, but then like I look at the Rotherham game and what happened,
Yeah.
and, and I'm sort of like, I'm probably like I think I'm only gonna tip like only like a 1-0 against Millwall, and it'd probably be a lot tighter than it probably should be.
Yeah, I think it'll be. I'm hoping for 4 points out of this. I think it could be 2 points. I think a draw against Brentford, and then maybe a draw against Millwall. But I think surely we should be beating Millwall. But then again, I do look at that Rotherham game and think we should have beaten them. Um, I guess just hopeful that we can bounce back, and having 2 games at home really should give us a bit of a boost. Um, maybe a 1-1 draw with Brentford and maybe a 2-0 or a 1-0 win against Millwall if I was being extra hopeful for the 4 points. I guess at this stage it'll just be good to get a couple of players back on the park. So Device and Burke down back would be good to see. Sort of just yeah, good form from the players. If we could see a couple of goals from Bowen and Grzycki, I mean that's sort of the main thing. But it's sort of a weird situation. We haven't had too many seasons lately where we've sort of had our fate sealed so early in the season. Normally, we're either fighting against relegation or fighting for promotion until at least sort of the last month. But now it seems pretty clear already that we're kind of just going to finish in that mid-table nothingness. So it's a bit of an odd feeling, but I guess it's just about finishing the season as strongly as we can heading into next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Not much we can do really. I think we sort of touched on it before that I think sort of both ways, promotion and relegation, are just about like mathematically out of reach for us. So
Yeah.
it's probably a nice relief to not have any extra pressure. I mean, for me, they probably would have liked the pressure of being, close enough to still chase promotion, or playoffs. But I think it's. I think and like we said before, overall, it's a successful season. If we like wherever we finish now, we were looking at considering the squad and considering everything that was going on, we were talking about relegation as an almost certainty. So to be mid-table, upper mid-table,
Yeah.
who can really complain?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good note to finish on. So thank you for joining me tonight, Dan.
No worries.
And thank you everyone for listening in. Until this time next week, come on, City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
City's on fire. We're going higher and higher. There's no turning back 'cause you're out.